So now we're going to have a speech by Piotr Bylica. And Piotr is not with us here today, but he's with us online.
Welcome everyone. The title of my paper is "In what sense is theistic evolution more rational than naturalistic evolution?" And my presentation consists of 5 main points. 1. The same set of facts can be accounted for by many mutually incompatible theories. Metaphysical statements are empirically neutral. The empirical data indicating the variability of life on Earth can be interpreted from both a naturalistic and theistic metaphysical perspective. 4. If C.S. Lewis and Alvin Plantinga are right, then our cognitive faculties cannot be considered reliable if one adopts the naturalistic view of evolution. There is no similar problem with the conjunction of theism and evolution. And 5. Logical and philosophical considerations suggest that theistic evolution is a more rational concept than a naturalistic evolution. Let's go to some more detailed discussion. As the philosophy of science teaches us, the same set of facts can be accounted for by many different theories which may themselves be mutually incompatible. This conclusion arises, among other things, from the so-called curve-fitting paradox. As we can see in the slide, the same empirical data represented as points can be explained by various theories which are represented by curves, passing through these points. In Gestalt psychology, a situation known as the Gestalt switch is well known. In this situation, the same patterns that appear on the retina are interpreted as different images. The famous example of the rabbit-duck illusion is shown in the slide. In the case of scientific theories, scientists must rely on factors other than empirical ones when aiming to choose one of the possible theories. These are usually methodological and philosophical factors, such as the principle of simplicity, which can be adopted for methodological reasons, for example, due to simpler calculations, or for ontological reasons, for example, due to the belief that the world is fundamentally not complex, chaotic, or in some way simple. The research of philosophers of science such as Ludwig Fleck and later Thomas Kuhn also indicates that scientists' decisions are influenced by socio-cultural factors. In the case of the Gestalt switch, empirical data also do not play a role in determining what we see. Again, extra epistemic factors, which can generally be classified as psychological, social, and cultural, are important. Let's go to the second point. The scope of what scientific theories or disciplines can competently establish about the world through empirical research is quite limited. None of them tell us about everything that exists, nor do they answer questions about why anything exists or whether there is anything beyond the scope of their research, etc. Similarly, no scientific discipline formulates moral judgments. No scientific discipline, therefore, answers philosophical or theological questions. These questions are the domain of philosophy or theology. We are setting aside here the issue of the role of philosophical assumptions in science, although they influence the work of scientists, including the types of explanations they seek or prefer. Being philosophical assumptions, they are precisely that, philosophical assumptions, and not something established empirically. Thus, what scientific disciplines reveal through empirical research can be ordered and explained in various ways using scientific theories. However, the scientific theories themselves can also be understood in different ways from a philosophical perspective. While empirical data alone do not allow us to decide between different scientific theories that aim to explain them, even less so can they be the basis for decisions between metaphysical positions. An important achievement of logical positivism, especially the Vienna Circle, was to draw attention to the empirical neutrality of metaphysical statements. However, a mistake of logical positivism was to assume that since empirical data do not allow for a decision between metaphysical statements, the statements are meaningless. Their mistake was that there is no cognitive valuable way to decide which metaphysical statements should be accepted and which rejected, and that they are irrelevant to science. For the purpose of this presentation, it is important to draw attention to the empirical neutrality of metaphysical statements, but also to the possibility of deciding on the value of metaphysical statements in the terms of their internal coherence and their role in science. Let's go to the third point. The empirical data indicating the variability of life on Earth can be interpreted from both a naturalistic and theistic metaphysical perspective. The same data, due to the curve-fitting paradox and the Gestalt switch, can be ordered and explained by different metaphysical theories. In this sense, they are metaphysically neutral. If so, both the naturalist and the theist can accept the fact of evolution on Earth. However, they will understand this fact differently, assuming different philosophical assumptions. For the naturalist, setting aside here the problem of varieties of naturalisms, to which sometimes even theistic naturalism is included. By naturalism, I mean a materialistic and atheistic position. So for the naturalist, evolution is a blind, mindless, undirected, and in this sense random, completely autonomous process. Man, in this view, is a product of a process that did not intended him. For the theist, evolution is somehow, regardless of how, directed, ultimately accounted for by God, understood as a knowing and purposefully acting being. Man is created in the image and likeness of God, where presumably this likeness consists, among other things, in our God's intended ability to know the truth. And here we go to the point 4. While these two metaphysical theories, naturalism and theism, can be equally compatible with the empirical data confirming the fact of evolution, they differ in terms of their internal coherence. This fact was pointed out primarily by two authors. The first was C.S. Lewis as the author of the so-called argument from reason against naturalism, and the second is Alvin Plantinga as the author of the so-called evolutionary against naturalism. We do not have time here for the detailed analysis of the similarities and differences between the two arguments. I believe that in fact we are dealing with one argument which can be generally called the evolutionary argument from reason against naturalism. The main thesis of this argument is that the naturalistic account of the evolution of life on Earth, including humans, undermines the reliability of our cognitive faculties. This combination of the idea of evolution and naturalism, C.S. Lewis called the myth of evolution and distinguished it from the scientific theory of evolution, which is based on empirical data. Lewis considered the myth of evolution to be false, but not because it is a myth. He also considered Christianity to be a myth, in a sense, only a true myth. The falsity of the myth of evolution, according to Lewis, was based on its internal logical difficulty. Unquote. The myth asks me to believe that reason is simply the unforeseen and unintended byproduct of mindless process at one stage of its endless and aimless becoming. The content of the myth thus knocks from under me the only ground on which I could possibly believe the myth to be true. If my own mind is a product of the irrational, if what seems my clearest reasonings are only the way in which a creature conditioned as I am is bound to feel, how shall I trust my mind when it tells me about evolution? Plantinga expresses this difficulty of naturalistic evolution as follows. The conjunction of naturalism with the belief that we human beings evolved in conformity with current evolutionary doctrine is in a certain interesting way self-defeating or self-referentially incoherent. Naturalism and evolution, NNE, furnishes a defeater for any belief produced by our cognitive faculties, including, in the case of one who accepts it, naturalism and evolution itself. Hence, its self-defeating character. According to Plantinga and essentially Lewis, our cognitive faculties such as memory, perception, and reason cannot be considered reliable if one adopts the view that they are the product of completely undirected random process for which having true beliefs is irrelevant. This problem, as Plantinga points out, does not arise under the assumption of theism. Quote, I see no similar problem with the conjunction of theism and the idea that human beings have evolved in the way contemporary evolutionary science suggests. According to traditional Christian and Jewish and Muslim thought, we human beings have been created in the image of God. This means, among other things, that God created us with the capacity of achieving knowledge. It is precisely in this sense that the idea of theistic evolution is more rational than the idea of naturalistic evolution. The concept of theistic evolution is devoid of the internal logical difficulty that we encounter in the case of naturalistic evolution. Now we can come to the conclusion. We have omitted the detailed discussion of the evolutionary argument from reason against naturalism, which is the subject of extensive debate. I just wanted to draw attention to the important consequences that arise when we combine this evolutionary argument from reason against naturalism with the findings of contemporary philosophy of science regarding the relationship between empirical data, theories, and metaphysical claims. Theistic evolution not only has the advantage of being internally consistent with respect to the reliability of our cognitive faculties, but also provides a foundation for the cognitive value of scientific inquiry. In contrast, naturalism leads to a skepticism about the cognitive value of all knowledge, including scientific knowledge, and the position of the naturalism itself. Therefore, given the empirical and, in this sense, scientific equivalence of theistic and naturalistic evolution, logical and philosophical considerations point to the superiority of the theistic view. In this sense, theistic evolution is a more rational concept than naturalistic evolution. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.